So let me start by, I was going to say that, we're looking forward to Election Day tomorrow, but now every day is Election Day. And the challenge for us at both the City Board of Elections and the County Clerk's Office is since the 29th, every day has been Election Day. So every day we have to make sure the polling places are open. But of course, tomorrow we'll get a larger turnout. What I want to focus on first is a lot of these new laws and new procedures. I want you to know how well they're working, I think, for both us and the city. Number one, for example, we broke records in early voting. Okay? We had a little under 52,000. I'm trying to compare apples to apples. Okay, so primaries to primaries. Back in 2008, when Barack Obama was a candidate for president, that was a record before. But under 52,000 in suburban Cook early voters. We already passed 102,000, and people are still voting today. So that shattered a record with early voting. We have something called grace period, which is, I think, another very new and important law. Grace period voting registration is, again, something new that the legislature gave us to allow people to register even after the deadline, because remember, one of the few places in the world that votes on a workday. Now, grace period registration, we've got over 5,000 of those, and what's interesting about the grace period registrants is there's a healthier percentage of young people doing that. Okay, so at all of our early voting sites over the last 2 weeks, people have also been able to go in, even if they haven't been registered, and register and vote on the spot. So that's grace period. We also have a record number of mail ballot applications. As you know, just a few years ago, Illinois said that everyone in Illinois could vote by mail without a reason. And in our case, in suburban Cook, we received over 35,000 applications, of which 16,000 have been returned so far. So we'll break a record there as well. So other improvements in technology are important for us. For example, Illinois started online registration. Now, registration's over now, but they did a wonderful job, and now it is second, of all the ways that people register to vote in Illinois, it is second to the driver's facilities. And I would not be surprised to see it surpass that in the future. Secondly, we have a new policy called online mail applications. For all those thousands of people who want to vote by mail, they can do it online. And we have now over 80% of all the requests for mail ballots coming from online. That is really important. One, because speed is so important. We both struggle late into Thursday night. That's our deadline. Any applications, we send out the ballots that night. Okay? But when we get these online requests, boom, we can turn around faster. Everything about it is better. So technology helps. I'm not going to say much about this, but other things that we're working together on, making changes on, is to improve the lists. Okay, we have something called NCOA, National Change of Address Cards. Tens of thousands of people now, as they move from Chicago to the suburbs, or if they move from Maywood in the suburbs to Bloomington, we can automatically update their registration. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this around the country. That is the future. Where as long as we have your data, we know who you are, why do you have to register again? So that is the future, but already we've made several steps to make it better. A couple points about demographics, kind of interesting. So the majority, not surprisingly, of all of our early voters are over 50 plus. Now, on the other hand, for when I said grace period before, 26% of those are between 17 and 24. It's the largest single grouping. We also, I should have mentioned before, but 17-year-old voting. Both Chicago and the suburbs have done very well on that. That's also new in the sense that any student, or not just student, anybody who's 17, be 18 by the November election, can register and vote in this election, and hundreds of them are doing that. As to demographics of party, about 71% of all those people voting grace chose a Democratic ballot, which means about 29% chose a Republican ballot. Not unusual for Cook County. Gender, 56% female, 44% male. Again, those are not surprising. One other new thing, but very important, that we're working very hard on is what's called Election Day registration. Now, even though we've had registration extended to what we call grace period, what's new about tomorrow is that anybody not registered can go to their home precinct and vote. Now, what's new about it is go to your home precinct. So what's important about that is, number one, if you have doubts, you can go to the website to kind of check your precinct. Otherwise, we will have people there can get you in the right precinct. It's also important to understand we're not too worried about lines. Okay? I mean, that was a concern when the law was passed. But we believe we have ways to handle those people pretty well. we have 2 to 3 e-poll books, the new electronic poll books we have in the polling places, both Chicago and the suburbs, that helps the judges a great deal to speed things up. So that is important tomorrow. We don't think we'll be overrun. I think it's a great thing. We'll see what happens. And finally, a couple little tips that if you have the leeway tomorrow, even though we don't expect long lines because so many people are voting before Election Day, but if you can vote between 9 and 3, that's, of course, the easiest time. Because it's long ballots and there's a lot of people you don't know, you can bring in cheat sheets or sample ballots. I mean, you can't be waving a big sign, of course, but if you've got stuff you want to take in because you can't remember a particular judge's name you want to vote for or against, that's quite okay to bring it in. Always remember, you can always ask questions. Do not worry about asking questions. And again, here's a point to remind you about our website. The chairman will talk about theirs. For Cook County suburban voters, cookcountyclerk.com. Websites are important. They can tell you if you're registered. They can tell you where the polling place is. Lots of information, including a virtual ballot. A lot of people can feel, what am I voting for? Well, I'm voting for president, but also it can give you a virtual ballot. You can see the candidates that you will be allowed to vote for. Finally, keep in mind that when election night's over, we still will be counting some. So keep that in mind, because now, because of provisional voting, which is a federal law, which is good, it gives us 2 weeks to count all the provisional votes, which is a really good thing. But because of that, we also extended the time that one could receive a late arriving mail ballot. And both of us jurisdictions had that problem. And so now, if your mail ballot is postmarked tomorrow, on the 15th, and we get it within 2 weeks, it'll count. Lance and I, we've seen too many cases where somebody FedExed their ballot and they mail it the Monday before the election. We didn't get it for a week. Now, I'm not saying that's common. But so keep in mind that you will have the results tomorrow night of everything, with the exception of some of the mail that's arriving today or arriving tomorrow that we won't be able to get in the system, and then these provisional ballots. Okay, so that's always the case, which doesn't matter except in really close elections, and that drive us all nuts because there could be a handful of votes out. Finally, in terms of security and preparation, as you know, we'll have lots of attorneys. We'll have attorneys ourselves out in the field. There'll be state's attorneys out there. We will have sheriff's deputies. One thing, we do not have police in the polling places. That's something we don't have. Of course, if they're needed for emergency, they can be called in, but we don't have police in the polling places themselves. So we'll have lots of rovers out there, lots of judges. So the final thing I just want to say before the chairman comes up is that these are good signs, okay? That we all pretty critical of our legislators in many cases, but these are all good signs. These laws are working for us here in Illinois. They're making it easier, more convenient, not just for people to vote, but for us to do our work, to have the list cleaner, to get away from some of the paper which bogs us down and costs us money. So I'm hopeful, and the numbers that we're talking about, and you'll hear similar records from the chairman, means that there's a lot of excitement in our democracy right now. Now, do remember, a high turnout in a primary is 44% in a primary. For example, in 2008, it was 43.3, I think, for suburban Cook, but in 2012, it was down about 23%. The voters are smart, and in 2012, for example, President Obama was already president, didn't have a serious challenge in a Democratic primary, so you had a lower turnout. So what I see going on is a pretty exciting primary. So thank you, and Chairman Hernandez.
Just a few issues I want to touch upon. Please remember our voting, our website is chicagoelections.com, and it'll take you directly into voter information. And we also have a link in Spanish, eleccioneschicago.com, and in Polish as well, that will take voters to all the information in their respective language. A complete list of polling places is found in the Chicago Sun-Times and in today's Red Eye. There have been a couple of questions about why do I have to declare a party for the primary, but the law requires the voter to select one party's ballot, and the voter may stay with that party or switch from primary to primary. So it's just for this primary that a voter will be required to select a party's ballot. there is, if you select a nonpartisan ballot, please note that it has no contests and no candidates, only a local referendum question, and there are nonpartisan ballots only in the 29th Ward and 10 precincts in the 32nd Ward. If you need to call on Election Day, you call Election Central with any questions or concerns. That's 312-269-7870. If you're calling today and you have any questions or concerns, it's our regular number, 312-269-2700. And our Election Central in this same room will be staffed with election attorneys, investigators, technicians, and warehouse staff to help solve any equipment issues and answer any questions posed by the voters or judges of election. We will have here in Election Central language assistance in English, Spanish, Chinese, Hindi, Urdu, Gujarati, Polish, and Korean. So Election Central is the place to call for any questions you may have, or any of our voters or judges of election. Now, as David mentioned, this will be the first election where you will be able to go to the precinct polling place to register for the first time, update your address, or file a name change, and then cast your ballot. Please remember, if you do so, today, you can also do so. You can go to any one of the 14 early voting sites. But if you are changing your registration or registering for the first time, you need to do that at your voting place. And you could visit chicagoelections.com. It'll take you directly to voter information. You just plug in your address and you will automatically get your polling place. You must present 2 forms of ID, one of which must have your name and address. Another ID simply has to have your name. So it could be anything from a credit card, a driver's license, a bank statement, a school ID. Vote by mail. Vote by mail is very important. We're seeing an increase in vote by mail. We know that voters like it, but we must remember that vote by mail ballots need to be postmarked on or before tomorrow, Tuesday, March 15th. Now, to be safe, I wouldn't wait till Tuesday, March 15th to have that envelope postmarked. I encourage all the voters to get their ballots out by today, March 14th, to ensure you're getting a postmark of March the 15th. Now, vote by mail ballots that are postmarked on or before Election Day can be counted even if they arrive up to 2 weeks after Election Day on March 29th. However, vote by mail ballots that are postmarked by March on or after March 16th will not be counted. So that raises the question. I have a vote by mail ballot in my hand, and I will not be able to go to the post office today and make sure that it's stamped. If you would like to vote at one of our early voting sites today, our 14 early voting sites, or you would like to vote tomorrow personally, all you have to do is bring that mail ballot with you to the early voting site or to your precinct and hand it in to the judge. The judge will give you a regular ballot and you will be able to vote. Now, there's some people who we have tried, and we've been very good at turning around any request for mail ballot. But in the event the voter has not received the mail ballot, all you have to do is go to the early voting site today or your precinct tomorrow and tell them, I have not received my mail ballot. Can I vote? And you will be allowed to vote provisionally. Now, a couple of things about turnout. Here in the city of Chicago, we've had 130 voters using early voting as of yesterday, and 20,000 vote-by-mail ballots returned.
How many? They're asking that you say that part again because you said 130 is.
I'm sorry, so that's right. We have had, as of yesterday, 130,000 voters using early voting and 20,000 vote-by-mail ballots returned. Now, these have already surpassed what we did in the 2008 primary. There we had 81,000 early voting ballots and 13 vote-by-mail ballots. So there are significantly more people voting early and voting by mail, which we're very happy about. And we think this reflects how voters are now getting more comfortable using these options. It's premature to say that these numbers are a sign that we might have a better turnout than the 53% we saw the first time that President Obama ran in February 2008. But it's interesting because the numbers are more comparable to the April 2015 runoff here in Chicago, and there we had a 42% turnout. So although we can't really say what the turnout will be, I hope those numbers guide you. Lastly, very quickly, we have a total of about 1.5 million Chicagoans who are registered to vote in the upcoming election. The city has 1,700 polling locations and 2,069 precincts. And to prepare for the primary, the city election board will have at least 500 investigators. Some will be going to precincts on a regular basis. Others will be on call if there are any problems. We have election coordinators who will assist judges, and we have 2,100 election coordinators who are much more technology savvy, and they will be going through each of the precincts and assisting in any way possible and troubleshooting. Lastly, as of yesterday, 9.8 or really 10% of the registered voters have voted in the city of Chicago. And if anyone has any more questions, feel free.